If it's made from plastic, it's likely to have made its way to the ocean. One of the largest accumulations of the junk lies at the convergence of currents in the Pacific Ocean. It's called the Pacific Gyre and has been dubbed the trash vortex or the Great Garbage Patch. Roughly the size of the US state of Texas, it's estimated at 3.5 million tons of plastic. Mammals, birds and fish are all at risk from the floating and degrading debris. Well, to raise awareness of the problem of plastics in our oceans, vacuum maker Electrolux has collected plastic from the beaches and reefs of 5 bodies of water and incorporated the material into the casings of a special line of vacuums called Vacs from the Sea. They'll be auctioned to raise money for research and cleaning. Well, a number of organisations are involved in various projects to study and clean up the problem. Just before we came on air, I spoke to Philippe Cousteau, CEO of Earth Echo International and grandson of legendary oceanographer Jacques Cousteau, about the scale of the problem.
Well, the problem is massive. According to the Ocean Conservancy, an organization I work with here in the United States that organizes the largest global marine debris cleanup, every year in September, they mobilize almost 500,000 people. And in one day, those 500,000 people in over 100 countries clean up over 7 million pounds of trash. It's a global calamity that's polluting our oceans. And marine debris, as it's referred to, varies everything from single-use plastic bags and cigarette butts all the way up to massive ghost nets that can be miles and miles long that continue floating in the ocean, fishing forever until they sink.
And what kind of damage then do they do to the ocean?
Well, again, that varies as well. If you think about ghost nets, they continue to fish and they capture whales and dolphins. One of the big killers of marine mammals and large whales along the coast of the United States here is fishing gear, down to smaller things like plastic bags or sandwich bags that sea turtles, which every species of sea turtle is endangered or threatened, mistake for jellyfish, which they normally feed on, and will eat those and choke to death, all the way down to even smaller. As plastic breaks down, it photodegrades, but it doesn't go away, it just breaks into smaller and smaller pieces. So as fish and other animals consume that, and birds, or the types of fish even that we eat, they absorb those plastics and the toxins that those plastics carry, and then that can transfer into humans. So it runs the gauntlet from massive multi-mile long ghost nets all the way down to small toxic pieces of plastic.
Presumably like cigarette butts.
Well, and that's what's really interesting. I find one of the most shocking statistics that the Ocean Conservancy found out as a result of their global research is that 65% of marine debris is land-based. 25% comes from smoking-related activities. And actually smoking, the filters and a little bit of that tobacco oftentimes carry a lot of toxins, as we all know. And so the average person, how many times every day I could count on both hands I see somebody smoking and flicking a butt into the street that ends up in the storm drain, down into a lake, down into a stream, a river, and down into the ocean, carrying those toxins with them. Now, one little cigarette butt might not mean much, but when you multiply that by the billions that are thrown out every year, that's a considerable amount of pollution.
And that is invariably where cigarette butts and other plastic substances end up, the ocean.
It is. We all live downstream from one another, and polluting the ocean is like sawing the limb upon which we're sitting. The oceans are the life support system of this planet, and it's suicide to continue to pollute them and destroy them the way that we are doing. I
mean, the two ways of dealing with this, I suppose, many perhaps other ways, but I'm thinking, international legislation and right down to the individual. What can be done, A, by the individual, and what is the sense, B, that there might be international legislation to govern this in the years ahead?
There's lots of local legislation, and it works. A simple thing like a bag tax works very, very well. Now, from the perspective of what each of us can do, really think about, there's this phrase, you throw something away. There's no such thing as away. Everything ends up somewhere. I'll tell you a story. I was up in the Arctic filming with Discovery and BBC about 2 years ago. There aren't many people where we were. In fact, there were really no people up there, and yet we saw marine debris. I even saw flip-flops floating, sandals floating in the water and washing up on the shore of places, some of the land masses that surround the Arctic Circle. And no one wears sandals up there. So the oceans carry this stuff a long, long distance, and we need to be cognitive of what we do and realize that everything we do has an impact. And I think first and foremost is targeting young people, and I think young people are the key.
Final question. Presumably this goes to the whole generation of plastics themselves. But if I could just move aside to another big issue in the US this year, the Gulf Coast, of course, the BP oil spill. Have you been there recently, and what's your sense of how that is coming along?
Well, I spent most of my summer covering that story for various different networks, of course CNN included, and the concern now is that is so often the case, out of sight is out of mind. There isn't, huge amounts of oil that's washing up on the beaches anymore, but we know, despite some industry, I think I would say rosy forecasts, rosy predictions, that overly optimistic, that there's still oil dispersed in the water column. There are still reports of oil that bubbles up and comes up to the surface, and weathered oil in patches floating on the surface. And we know that there's very likely large patches of oil in the deep ocean. So it's going to be infecting and affecting the Gulf Coast ecosystem for many years to come. All you have to do is look at Exxon Valdez in Alaska and the Ixtoc oil spill from 1979 in the Gulf of Mexico, and that oil is still around. It has not gone away. It's still a crisis, and we need to deal with it.
Philippe Cousteau, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And Philippe Cousteau's organisation launched an initiative this week. It's called Water Planet Challenge. It's aimed at middle and high school students. They pick an environmental challenge in their community, say, for example, ocean debris, and the site gives them the tools to create their own programme, and you can find it at earthecho.org.